You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. This episode is sponsored by Demand Derivatives, a startup futures exchange and clearinghouse trading the world's major assets in a creative new way. You already trade on an exchange. Here is your chance to own one. Before they approach large strategic partners for funding, the pioneering team at Demand Derivatives launched a crowdfunding portal so that regular traders have the chance to buy shares. Learn more and become a part of this revolutionary fintech project now at demandderivatives.com/crowdfunding. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the old Options Insider Radio Network, where we break down all of the crazy action going on the other side of the fence, the crypto side of the fence. Of course, we're going to talk the Bitcoin, the options, the futures, the spot, all that good stuff. Also ETH, some other altcoin, mix in a whole bunch of your questions and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, on the aforementioned network. Reminding you, if you like what you hear, this show, anything else we do on the network, remember, this is the crypto outlet. We have a whole bunch of other stuff there on the network. You know, we always have newcomers discovering this show from the world of crypto. Maybe you're kind of new to the world of options, in which case our Education Wednesday Content Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio, right up your alley. There's hundreds of episodes of each of those, including from our friends over there at Ally on Options Playbook Radio and a whole bunch more. So you can sink your teeth into a whole bunch of great options education, pretty much from 0 to 60, all completely for free. So it's all there on the network. Remember, if you like what you hear, this show, anything else we do on the network, keep those reviews, keep those comments coming. We do like to hear from you guys. And let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. It is time to roll out the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the show we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto, derivatives, and indeed beyond, and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. Next up on the program, old friend of the network. He hasn't been on in a little bit. He's busy over there across the pond. He is usually known as the Spikes father. Maybe on this show we'll call him the BITVOL father. Nonetheless, he is Simon Ho, the CEO over there at T3 Index. Simon, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program, sir.
Hello, Mark. How are you? Thank you very much for having me.
I am good. How are things at, 2 a.m. over there in Sydney, sir?
It's not that bad. 7 a.m.
Oh, 7 a.m. Much more palatable hour than when you usually join us on the network here. Well, it's been a little bit. It's been a little bit since you've been on the crypto program as well. Why don't you do a real quick overview, because there's always new folks discovering this program in particular, of what the heck it is you guys do over there at T3, sir.
Yeah, sure. So at T3, the company's name is a T3 Index, and as the name suggests, we are in the business of trying to create indices. So as you mentioned, we happen to have given birth to the Spikes Index and a few others that are in that complex as well. But we also have a very strong interest in cryptocurrency stuff as well. So we've done quite a few things in that space, and I'm looking forward to sort of chatting about it with you today.
All right, let's get into that then. A lot to talk about, which merits a full hot seat investigation here. Let's kick it off, Simon. We'll get to some of the other things you've talked about on the show in the past and how they're trading right now. But you got some new stuff up your sleeve, which is always fun. That's why we like bringing you on. You always got some new items, a new index, a new tradable product, something lurking up your sleeve. And it sounds like, Simon, you've been busy over there once again, because now you guys over there at T3 are unleashing the crypto XP index, aka the X Power index. I like that XP. That means I can level up in crypto. I like that idea. A little gamification of crypto there, Simon. But effectively what you're talking about here, a basket of the 10 largest cryptocurrencies that go. So you get Bitcoin, but you get a whole bunch of other cryptocurrencies. And you guys set it up in an interesting way. So why don't you break it down for us, Simon? What the heck is the Crypto XP Index, and how do I level up by trading it, sir?
Well, yes, that's a fantastic intro. So this is a ticker of CXP. As you mentioned, it stands for Crypto XP, X being the 10 numeral, and P just being power. So this is our, I guess, first foray into maybe thinking about creating a tradable product. So like say an ETF or something in jurisdictions where those are permitted. So essentially what this is it's a representation of an investment value portfolio of 10 cryptocurrencies. We rebalance it every month, and we do that by their respective market caps. Clearly, that's not something new. Anyone who knows anything about indices and creation of them will know that that's fairly standard. What is very different is that the weighting of the investments is determined by Zipf's distribution. Now, I must say that I didn't know of Professor George Zipf until recently, but he is, he's famous for his work that he did in linguistics. He was someone who he pioneered a lot of that. In fact, his name is George Kingsley Zipf. He's an American linguist, and he was born in sort of the 1902 sort of era. And basically what he discovered here was really interesting in that he had a distribution for the frequency of words. So the most common word would be whatever, let's say the word the, and then the second one would be half as popular as the first, and so on. So it would go all the way down the whole list of language until you get basically tiny distributions. So it's a naturally occurring pattern that affects a wide variety of areas from linguistics and population and stuff like that. So we thought that this distribution was ideal as a middle ground between investing according to market cap, which would heavily prioritize sort of the two big coins, i.e. Bitcoin and Ethereum. But we wanted also to showcase some of the lesser coins and to give it greater sort of diversification. So the weighting distribution for cryptocurrencies in this particular index is constant, and it does a really good job, we think, given the shape of the weightings that exist in currency in cryptocurrency pairs. So essentially that's it. We're using Zipf's distribution. It's known as a Zipfian distribution, and we use that to calculate our monthly constituents.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I wasn't that aware of Zip's distribution until you mentioned up, because you're right. It has origins in linguistics, not an area we normally delve into here on the network. But it does attempt to solve one of the problems that you kind of just alluded to out there in crypto, which is it's all about the big dog. It's all about Bitcoin. It is the 800-pound gorilla in every room. ETH's doing an able job of carving out its own place, but it's still predominantly Bitcoin. It drives all the boats out there. So if you're going to have any sort of realistic top 10 currencies, it's going to be all Bitcoin and then a little bit of smattering of everything else. And how do you get beyond that? Equal weight, well, that gets crazy too. That gets all sorts of issues as well. So this is an interesting approach to did you try a number of other distributions and you finally came across Zips? How did you finally coalesce along this one, Simon?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, ultimately, everybody realizes that the weightings are hugely skewed. And so that's a problem that I don't think has really been addressed all that properly in the past. So this was our attempt to do it, and it seems to be a pretty darn good way to do it. I mean, it's obviously very difficult. As you mentioned, we have a sheet that we sort of calculate for ourselves, and you've got Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Bitcoin Cash, and so on. So it goes down the line. But you can see that the weightings tail off very, very quickly. And so we wanted to find a way to intellectually do this in a way that was more representative of the space rather than just, 2 or 3 coins. So there must be other ways to do it, of course, but this, I think, is quite, we like this quite a lot. We spend a lot of time looking at various solutions, and this seems kind of nice and fair for us and gives you really what you're looking for in something like this. Because ultimately the idea here would be to take this to a jurisdiction where they would facilitate the creation of an ETF of this index. And, these weightings will certainly help to make it more representative of the market as a whole.
And let's talk about those representations. So we're having a basket here, a Zip distributed basket of the top 10 currencies out there right now. So what are the 10 products that you are investing in right now, sir, and how does it break down by ranking?
Okay, yeah. So right now it goes Bitcoin, which is about a third. Ethereum is 17%. XRP is 11%. Then you've got Bitcoin Cash is 8.5%. Bitcoin itself, Binance Coin is 6.8%. Litecoin 5.7%. Polkadot 4.9%. Cardano's 4.3%, Bitcoin SC is 3.8%, and EOS is 3.4%. So that's pretty much the breakdown. We also did some analysis on how this would have done historically relative to other things. So, for example, if we compare the CXP to just say Bitcoin over a history, then you have a Sortino ratio of the CXP is at 131, whereas if you just held it in BTC, it would be 1.08. So clearly and the sharps also represent that as well. So the sharp ratio for Bitcoin would be 0.79, and for CXP, it would be 0.95. So those kind of bear out the fact that it's kind of more advantageous to do it in the way that we have.
I like you have data going back to February of 2014, so folks can get a little bit of historical insight into how the crypto space has changed. And, the top 3 are not quite the same, but pretty close. Number 1, still Bitcoin back in 2014. Number 2 is Litecoin. Litecoin, as we said before on the show, has kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside. It's number 6 in the current distribution. XRP has been stubborn and doggedly there at number 3 since all the way back in 2014. XRP, of course, coming on a little bit headwinds out there of late. So we'll have to check in later, see how it's faring on the program. Number 4 is Dogecoin. You guys have been hitting us up with Doge like crazy of late. I'm not sure why suddenly you got a little bit of a bee in your bonnet for Doge versus everything else out there. But you folks would have loved this index back in 2014 because it was all about Doge at 8.5% distribution into Doge. And then NXT was number 5. Namecoin number 6. Quark, another one we haven't heard much about of late, number 7. Vertcoin number 8. Unobtainium. I love some of these names. Number 9, and Digibyte was number 10. Right now, Simon just broke it down for us. They're a little bit different in the current distribution with Bitcoin Cash, Binance Coin, Litecoin, Polkadot, Cardano, Bitcoin SV, and good old EOS taking up the bottom half of the top 10 out there. Now, you mentioned kind of, Simon, this is still kind of a concept index, so we can't sink our teeth into this and trade it yet. But what is the prognosis for being able to sling the crypto XP index and being able to level up in the near future, sir?
Yeah, so that's the thing that we're most focused on now. So we need to do this in a jurisdiction where they permit these kinds of investments. So to begin with, we're friends with the Bermuda Stock Exchange. They were actually bought by MIAX not that long ago. And so we're exploring the possibility there of publishing and reporting the index on their BSX website to start with. And from there, we'll just take it step by step. Obviously, we want to commercialize this. We've seen from the recent moves in markets that, Bitcoin looks like it's here to stay. Perhaps the change in the guard politically as well in the US is probably maybe going to be more friendly. You've got firms like BlackRock talking about the fact that they're going to be, or that they are investing in it. And so it's just becoming more ubiquitously sort of acceptable. And I think that's going to continue. And so I think, therefore, the evolution of these products is the natural next step. So that's what we are looking to do.
It would be nice to hopefully get something like this in the U.S. someday in the near future. I'm not sure. I like your optimism about the new administration and maybe opening the kimono a little bit on all things crypto. But this is a fascinating one. Of course, you can sink your teeth into it more, learn all about it over there at T3index.com. Listeners, we have to keep rolling with the program. Simon's going to join me, help me break down all the fun stuff going on in the world of crypto right now, starting with, of course, the big dog. It is time for the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we break down all the action going on out there in the number one digital asset you folks love to trade. Yes, talking Bitcoin. It's been a little while since we've gathered here together on the old crypto rundown. Of course, we were off last week for the Martin Luther King holiday here in the U.S., so we have a couple of weeks worth of activity to catch you up on. And surprisingly, for given how much Bitcoin has moved around of late, the actual net move show to show wasn't that much, certainly not compared to what we've seen of late out there in Bitcoin land. Of course, we saw it break through the 40,000, get up to 41, 42,000 in that range for a while. And so north of 40,000 is just already blowing people's minds. And of course, it gave it back up and then it kind of vacillated around. Coming into today's show, we were up almost 2,000 points from our last level. Last show, we were at 31,777. Coming into today's show was at 33,733. So that puts it up almost 2,000 points, about 1955. Of course, it looks like since Simon and I have been running on about leveling up in Bitcoin, it has given up some of that down to about 33,100 now. So as I've said many times, if you don't like the price in Bitcoin, just wait 5 minutes and it'll move somewhere. Maybe you like a little better, maybe not. So a lot going on. But Simon, let's start there. It's obviously been a just completely insane period from a Bitcoin volatility perspective. We've been crunching the numbers over here on the show for a while. We're getting up to levels, 150% and not more, and keeping those levels for quite some time. We've seen the vol come off a bit of late, as obviously you can't sustain those levels forever. They were just astronomical. But I'm curious for you, you crunch the volatility numbers out there for a variety of assets, including Bitcoin, via your BITVOL index. So catch us up. It's been a little while since you've been on the program. What's been lighting up the tape out there in BITVOL, and what are some of the insane levels you've been seeing out there of late, sir?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. What's really interesting is that we obviously we've had a period of immense volatility. We have both the Bitcoin, so our BITVOL index, and an ETH index as well for volatility. So the recent high in Bitcoin volatility was 171. So people used to trading volatility in other markets would be quite astonished by that. But believe it or not, that's not actually the highest ever in Bitcoin. That was 190. So that was I guess it was pretty close. But what did make a high was the Ethereum volatility was over 200% at the same time that the Bitcoin was at 171. So it's pretty much off the charts. It's just amazing volatility. And what happened recently was a colleague of mine said, I'm not really sure if the BITVOL index provides the same kind of performance that, say, VIX might. When the market goes down, the vol tends to go down quickly. In this case here, in a matter of a week, it fell 34 vols. So I think that was a fairly decent response to, the decline in the actual level of vol. But if anyone wants to see that vol, it's available on our website, T3 Index, but it's also available on Refinitiv, and I think the code is BTC vol. So yeah, you can check it out in either spot.
Yeah, it has been fascinating to watch, and we've been talking about it on our TWIFO This Week in Futures options program as well. The vol on the options trading over there at CME in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the Bitcoin has been leading our volatility decliners for the past couple of weeks. So actually, by the way, I'm on your site right now, Simon. Looks like you've had a nice little upgrade since the last time I've checked. A little bit of web redesign coming in the T3 landscape, huh, sir?
Oh, we try our best.
I'm checking out right now, listeners. You guys can do that yourselves, of course, to see all the various data. Go to drop down, find BITVOL for yourself. You mentioned this recent spike actually wasn't the high for BITVOL. Do you recall when that was and what was going on at that time there, Simon?
So according to the data, it happened just recently. So the 15th, that was 171.72 was the high in the BITVOL index. But the one that I was talking about earlier, which happened in March of 2020, that got to a high of 190.28.
What could have possibly happened in March of last year that caused an enormous spike in volatility, Simon? I'm completely at a loss for what could have driven your index to new highs. Of course, that was the insane times with the mad sell-off of the pandemic. Listeners, Bitcoin sell-off, I think it was about 30% intraday at one point. It's not surprising it would hit a nearly 200, as you say, Simon, looking at it right now. 190.25 was pretty much where it topped out at, which should give you some sense for how much vol we saw of late. Hitting a 171, almost 172. You're not that far off that 30% sell-off, as we're seeing that mad dash above 40,000 and that equally mad return back to the 30+ thousand level. You could probably see an argument for that. Let's head on out to the hourly vol land. Now, remember all this data coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. Check it out for yourselves. gvol.io. It's very simple. And you can check out the tools and all the other cool stuff for yourself. They break down the vol in an interesting way as well over there, including the hourly vol. We like to look at hourly vol to see how much vol is really changing minute by minute out there as the day progresses out there. Our last show, the hourly vol for Bitcoin is at about 135%. So still frothy, still elevated, but not quite the 150 plus level or even the 170 plus level that the BITVOL hit very recently. And coming into today's show, it's still frothy, but it's just coming back under the triple digit levels at about a 99 and change when we kicked off the show. So again, still much more volatile than most other major assets you're going to trade out there, unless you're trading GameStop stock today. That's a whole other story for a whole other day. But aside from that, it's still, in terms of major assets, it's pretty much one of the most volatile ones out there. In terms of the hourly SKEW, the 30-20 SKEW, so not just the 25 delta call, not just the 25 delta put, but the whole strip of 30 delta down to 20 delta. If you don't know what any of that means, check out our Education Wednesday shows, listeners. They'll explain it for you in a lot more detail. Our last show, that SKEW was actually kind of surprisingly flat. There wasn't a market bias to the calls or the puts, which if you know much about Bitcoin, you know that's a little bit unusual. Coming into today's show, that's back again. It's almost about a 16 point, about 15 3/4 out there. So the SKEW showing a little bit more movement and evolution since our last show. In terms of the open interest, hourly open interest, remember that changes minute by minute. It's so nice that these crypto exchanges will actually update the OI on a more frequent basis than once every 24 hours. Simon, I found a little bit of interesting things looking at the analytics in the crypto space that I wish we had in the quote-unquote traditional option space. Do you find things like the more frequent updating of OI out there in the crypto landscape? Does it make your job a little bit easier when you're out there crunching away at some of these indices that you wish you had these in the traditional option space, sir?
Absolutely, yes. I think that GVOL, they've done an excellent job. There's also a competitor to them that do very well as well. I mean, that it's really quite fantastic. It's very rich in terms of the offering on the data front, and they're excellent tools to be able to sort of zero in on the things that are interesting to investors. So yeah, I think it's really good. And when a lot of the other stuff, legacy exchanges, they're used to doing things the way they've done them, and this is good because it's a break away from that and going into sort of more detail. It's always going to be useful for investors to have that kind of granularity.
It is indeed. Let's get a little granular. Let's look at the hourly open interest. Remember, that ticks up and down all the time as well. Last show was a little bit north of 200,000, about 201,000 for Bitcoin. Today, about 219,000. So it has ticked up a little bit in the interim. Then a lot of that came off. A lot of action in the weeklies these days, which shows a lot of ebbing and flowing in the OI show to show here. And now, again, it's up a little bit, but not quite as high as it was. It was almost a little bit north of 240 in between these shows before some of that OI went off the board. Speaking of open interest, let's look across the broad spectrum. Some people like to look at things in a notional perspective. I know you guys like that out in the crypto space. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I'll speak the lingua franca of the crypto space if I have to. And the overall notional value of the OI out there in Bitcoin, it had been threatening and broke through 10 billion a few times. That's, of course, aggregating the OI across most of the major venues. So that's the big dog DEREBIT, but you're also talking CME, Huobi, LedgerX, OKEX, Bit.com, a whole bunch of others added in there. That has since come off as we've seen this mad dash north of 40,000, then back down to 30 plus thousand. We've seen some of that OI come in. And coming into today's show, the collective OI is just slightly over 8 billion, with DEREBIT at about 7.1 billion of that. And then number 2 out there is actually OKEX with 457 million. Bit.com, number 3, 431 million. And then we've got CME coming at number 4, 359 million. And then LedgerX at number 5 with 164 million. So we saw a nice spike of interest, spike of volatility, spike of action, spike of volume, spike of everything recently out there in Bitcoin. Now starting to come off a little bit. If you're wondering how that OI breaks down calls versus puts, it's still call heavy, but not quite as strong as perhaps it's been in the past. About 134,000 contracts open on the call side of the ledger, and about 89,000 puts are open out there. If you're wondering how things have been on the volume front since our last show, last show was insane. On our last show, which was all the way back, it seems like an eternity now, listeners. It was all the way back 2 weeks ago on January 11th. We saw Bitcoin effectively hit a new volume record out there. It was an insane amount of paper. We're at about 2 billion worth of notional volume trading over there on DEREBIT, and that was far and away a record. We were talking about 1 billion not too long ago, and seeing how that was a record. And then Bitcoin, of course, blew through it. Yeah, a little bit north. If you add in all the venues, it was looks like about 2.3, 2.4 billion out there. So a lot of paper going up on the 11th. Pretty much every day since then has been a lot less. The 12th did about 1.5 billion. That was the most active day after the 11th. And then they kind of hit a few days around 1 billion, which were pretty active. And of course, of the past week, the most active day was on the 21st. So 4 days ago, they hit 1 billion again. Another active day. Everything else this week has been a half of that, if not much less. We saw some pretty light days. So overall, this week, not exactly a huge volume week, but our last show day 2 weeks ago was the biggest day we've seen ever out there. So a lot of action on the paper back then. Let's look at where this OI is lining up out there as well, where you guys are actually playing. And we said it before, we'll say it again, crypto likes a quarterly. So we are seeing a lot of action in March, but also, as I said earlier, the weeklies are really starting to come on strong, and we're seeing a lot of action in Jan now as a result. So the Jan 29th expiration is leading the dance right now with 102,000 contracts. March is a fair way behind that at 42,000 contracts. And Feb's looking to come on strong a little bit as well as some of those weeklies kick in. So maybe that old saw about all the volume kind of just aggregates and moves from quarterly to quarterly. Maybe we'll see more of that changing as the marketplace evolves and grows and gets a little bit more liquid out there. Speaking of getting more liquid, and Simon, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this one as well, because we've been talking for a while about where the action is from a strike perspective out there in Bitcoin options. And for the longest time, it was that 36,000 strike. Remember, we profiled it again on our last show, listeners. A trader came in on October 30th of last year. That's how long I've been talking about these, and gobbled up about 20,000 of the Jan 36,000 calls for 0.003 Bitcoin. That was back when Bitcoin was 13,285. Spent about $750,000 to do it. So it was not a small outlay by any means. They paid about an 87 vol, if you're curious what that was. Obviously, had to pay up for some of those farther out of the money strikes. We kind of joked about it on the show. It seemed like an absurd trade. Probably something to do with a risk mitigation type trade. Wasn't really maybe an outright spec. But either way, the options portion of it was insane. And it worked out insanely well too, which shows how insane the markets have been. Of course, we not only did we reach that strike, we blew through it. We blew through 40,000. Those options were many thousands of handles in the money for a brief period, and then they gave it up again. And we talked on the show about maybe they should have closed these out. That was a huge winner by just about any approximation. In fact, it even beat our friend 50 Cent, who put on his VIX options for about 50 cents, and they traded for about $45. These even beat that. So it was looking pretty good. Looks like they finally came in and closed it recently. Our friends over there at Genesis Vol were just talking about, they finally saw that OI drop on the 36,000 strike last week. Sales coming in, if you're wondering, 136% vol. So obviously a much higher vol level, did well there, and much higher price level. But still, there's a fascinating analysis to be done here, Simon, on the history of these calls. I'm curious if you saw this trade go up and have been paying attention to like we have here, because it was just so outlandish, and yet it clearly paid off, at least from the limited perspective of this trade. And then any other trades that were coming across your radar that were lighting up your tape over there, Simon, of late in Bitcoin options?
Not particularly. So we don't, I guess, we don't look at the sort of granularity of the trading and such going on through the course of the day. So unfortunately, that's not really our bag. But wow, that is an amazing trade. When you were just talking about it then, it kind of was very reminiscent of 50 Cent, wasn't it? I mean, that to hold on for so long is quite remarkable. As you say, given that maybe it was a hedge against something else, it would seem more likely to be. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't give you any further insight. I just wish I was involved.
Yeah, that's one of those ones we mocked it all the way until it printed money, and then we said, maybe we shouldn't mock it anymore, because it was just so outlandish. It needed Bitcoin to almost triple to see that thing really start making serious money. And it did. It's just insane. So one of those things where we mocked it until we did not mock it any longer. But if you're wondering, listeners, the 36,000 strike is no longer the leading number one strike out there. Most of that, if not all of that, has come off the board out there. There's a scattered few left. So maybe some lookalikes piled in there. But it's now the 52,000 strike. So if you're wondering if you wanted another outlandish strike, it's now the 52,000 strike. That is the number one open strike in all of Bitcoin. Pretty much all of that on the Jan side of the ledger. If you're wondering, that's also opened more. It's gained about 7,000 contracts open interest since our last show. So maybe they rolled some of the 36,000 to the 52s. Either way, they had the money to do it if they wanted to. But still, it's just fascinating. The fact that they were rolling, they would keep it in Jan. They wouldn't roll it out to another month. That's usually the way you roll these things. So a lot to be done. There's a case study or two here to be done in just this trade alone, and the insanity that has ensued as a result. Speaking of insanity, not as much insanity going on over there on the CME Bitcoin front. The futures are doing a lot of paper. About 18,000 a day seems like it's kind of the average of late. Wednesday of last week was the lone day below 18,000. They did about 13,000. So the futures have been pretty robust. The options are starting to pick up. They're seeing, again, this is the beefier contract. It's a 5X contract. So add these numbers in with that multiplier. But still, we saw every day last week was pretty much below 100. The most active day was 93 contracts, which if you know anything about Bitcoin options at CME, that's actually a lot. They actually managed to do quite a bit last week compared to what they have been doing, which is 20 out a week some weeks. So that's a decent increase, but still not quite the bonanza. I know, Simon, you say you don't pay attention to the day-to-day options flows as much. Have you been surprised, as some others are, that it's been taking a while for, the CME options to find their footing? I mean, clearly the futures are doing decent paper. So it's not just a multiplier thing that's keeping people away. Yet for whatever reason, the options have been slow to see the volume increase that we've seen in the futures. Does that surprise you as well, Simon?
Yes and no, I guess, because, this is an age-old legacy exchange. And so, they weren't exactly the first people to get involved in this market. And I think it's what's astonishing to me is the extent to which DEREBIT rules in the option space. They've just put together a marvelous exchange, and whatever they've done, they've done extremely well. So I guess it doesn't surprise me really, because I think the bulk of people will head to DEREBIT because that's where the liquidity is at, and people want to go where the bid offer spread is tightest, where they've got the most choice in terms of what they can buy and sell. So I think that they'll probably remain the outright leader for quite some time. I think it'll be hard for other people to sort of chase them down, just because now they have the history of doing it. They've got so many different things to offer. I think that might be a part of it.
Certainly seems like DEREBIT's going to be a hard one to unseat. Well, we'll keep an eye on that as we keep on rolling into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's go beyond Bitcoin, except for this part right here, where we break down the market cap. Kind of hard to avoid Bitcoin in that conversation. Remember, our usual caveat out there, these market caps, take them with a tasty grain of salt. A little bit of skullduggery goes on behind the scenes for these overall market caps, but the rankings, I think, have a little bit more value. Number 10 in our top 10 this week, Binance Coin at about almost $6.5 billion. Number 9, Bitcoin Cash at about $8.3 billion. Number 8, Litecoin. Litecoin has, just talked about it earlier, how much it has fallen off. Still holding firm, though, at number 8, worth about $9.3 billion overall market cap. Number 7, Chainlink, about $9.5 billion. Number 6, Cardano, almost 11, $10.9 billion. Number 5, how the mighty have fallen, XRP, down to about 12, almost $12.5 billion. Number 4, Polkadot, usurping XRP, taking the number 4 spot at 16, pretty much billion even. Number 3, Tether, holding firm out there, the old XRP spot at number 3 at about 24, almost 25 billion. Number 2, you know what it is. It's ETH, closing in on 160 billion out there. Number 1, the big dog, Bitcoin, 627 billion. We had some guests recently talking about the 1T, the 1 trillion level for Bitcoin. We kind of laughed, we kind of joked, and then it didn't seem like it was that much of a laughing matter anymore as we started racing north. In fact, we had a poll about which you guys would think would hit 1 trillion market cap first, Tesla or Bitcoin. Maybe we'll get to the results of that a little bit later in the crypto question segment. Coming into today's show, ETH, another one that I know Simon watches quite a bit, has been on quite the run of late. On our last show, we had ETH shy of the 1,000 level, 976. Coming into today's show, we saw it up quite a bit at about 1379. That puts it up about 400 handles from our last show. In between our last shows, actually. In fact, today we hit a high of 1476 just earlier this morning. It shows how much ETH is moving around out there these days. That is a new all-time high for ETH. The previous time it really hit this 1400 level, because it has been there before, was back in January of 2018. That's when it hit its previous all-time high of 1417.38. It has just eclipsed that today. So interesting stuff afoot out here. Simon, I know you do the BITVOL index, but you also do the ETH-vol index as well. What are your thoughts on some of the interesting volatility action we've been seeing out there of late in all things ETH, sir? Yeah,
it's been amazing to watch, to be honest. I've been transfixed. Just the amount that it moves is quite incredible. As I mentioned, the high was over 200. And you referenced the earlier thing that happened during 2020 in March when VIX spiked up to 80 and so on. Then it got to 190 at that point, but this was actually higher than that. So quite astonishing stuff, to be honest. I'm not sure where it goes from here, but I have a feeling that potentially it's got more to go in terms of downside at this point. It's just it averages, let's say it averages in sort of between 50 to 70. So it's around about 60. So we're still at a very elevated level. So I have a feeling that given that we had a recent blow off top here, that I think it might settle down for the near future.
I called it the ETH-vol, but it's actually called BITVOL Ethereum. Is that the technical name of the index, Simon?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
There we go. So looking for that, look for the BITVOL Ethereum index, and you'll see that it actually looks like it topped out pretty recently here at about, looks like 203 and change here. So hitting new highs out there in BITVOL as well. I'm not going all the way back to the earliest days of the index, though, so we'll see. Perhaps there are some earlier spikes, but nonetheless, fascinating stuff here. Check it out over there at T3. Let's look at the hourly vol to get a sense of how that's evolved. Our last show It was, I think the technical term is super juicy, super volatile. It's at 167% hourly volatility. And it's still fairly elevated. Coming into today's show is at about 148 and change. So it's come off a little bit, but still anything around 150% in any sort of major asset is absurdly volatile. And ETH certainly qualifies right now. The 30-20 SKEW out there, last show is about a 10.7. This show moved quite a bit, 23 3/4. So seeing a lot of evolution in that SKEW. What we haven't seen this week really was a ton of volume on the tape, which is, it's kind of interesting, actually. You think, all this action out here, all this movement would precipitate quite a bit of volume on the ETH front, and yet not so much. The most active day we've seen out there of late was actually back on the 19th of January, 286 million worth of notional going up on DEREBIT. So that was a new high out there. But every other day since then has actually been kind of light. We saw 217 million on the 20th. And then most of this week, we saw 100 plus million. Actually, one day we saw 46 million. So not a lot going up this week. Maybe even though ETH has been moving, just I think a lot of new consolidating, maybe people taking a bit of a break from the madness out there. In terms of overall OI, it looks like we have, let's see, last show it peaked at about 1.3 million. Today, coming into today's show, hourly OI was at about 1.2 million out there. And in terms of where the OI is monthly, where you guys are lining up from an expiration perspective, looks like March. So going back to the quarterly loves, that's still the case in ETH, with March at about 348,000 contracts, number one, followed by Jan at about 286,000 contracts. So some of the weeklies in February are also catching up. Looks like June has a fair amount on the tape as well. June has about 200,000 contracts. So quarterly love still alive out there in ETH. In terms of the strikes, this has been another one that's been fascinating to us as we moved up to 1,000 and now blown through it. You'd expect some of those strikes to come into the equation, and really not so much. The number one strike is still the 400 strike in ETH. There's a lot of legacy paper on that strike that just continues to dominate. And it actually seems like it's growing a little bit. It's up to about 91,000 now. So it's still far and away the number one strike. The 320 strike is right behind it at 78,000. And then the 480 strike at 74,000. What do all these strikes have in common? They're not even remotely relevant anymore to the conversation. You have to go pretty far out there, well below 70,000, to find a strike that's even remotely relevant, about 1,600. So, I mean, it's interesting how the OI is lining up out here in ETH. Very different from what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin. Let's hit some of the others really quickly before we roll out of the altcoin universe. Our old friend XRP having an interesting week yet again. Not a huge amount of movements, at about 27 cents and change, which is pretty much about where it was this time 2 weeks ago. So it seems like they've stabilized out there after all these concerns about the SEC investigation kind of plunging them off of their recent highs. There were a lot of people out there saying a lot of dire things about the future of XRP. At least for now, it seems to have stabilized around 27 cents. And then Bitcoin Cash, of course, up about 22, almost $23 from our last show. And Bitcoin SV taking a little bit lighter approach, up about $3 from our last show. But what is not lighter is our crypto questions. We have a few weeks worth to catch up on. So without further ado, it is time to answer your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crypto questions segment. You guys have a bunch of questions. We also like to turn the spotlight on you guys sometimes, like we did recently here on the show. We asked you guys the recent explosion in Bitcoin and ETH. Has it made you more interested in trading cryptocurrencies? And it looks like our audience still a little jaded, still obviously heavily on the traditional options front. They're kind of evenly split, though, on the prospects of trading more cryptocurrencies. 44% of you said yes. 40% said no, so kind of evenly split. And then these things are a fad. We like to throw those fun third ones in there sometimes. That got about 16%. So if you add the no and that together, you get slightly over half still saying no. But that's up from a much smaller percentage not too long ago saying yes. So interesting stuff afoot out there. We've also got our regular longtime listener, J3 Dingle, chiming in saying, I'm really enjoying listening to the crypto drawdown. Yeah. It has been an interesting one to watch of late. You know, when he first sent that in, we saw the rally, and I thought maybe not so much. Then, of course, we have seen a bit of a drawdown again. So a little bit of a decline out there of late, but I guess it kind of depends where you're looking at. And ETH, not so much, right? So fascinating stuff has been afoot out there in the crypto space of late, but I hear what you're saying about the crypto drawdown. Well played, sir. All right, here's the other poll I referenced earlier here in the show. We asked you guys very recently what was going to hit 1 trillion, the 1T market cap level first. The name everyone's got on their lips, Tesla, or the other name everyone has on their lips, maybe except for today, everyone's talking GameStop. But outside of that, it's Bitcoin. So, and our audience, once again, pretty evenly split. You folks came in droves to answer this one. 57.6% finally coming down on the T side of Tesla, and 42.5% or so coming in on the Bitcoin side. So pretty close, pretty tightly neck and neck out there, which I think is kind of fascinating. And again, it's anyone's bet. Maybe we should have added another level to that, to saying maybe will they get cut in half first as well. That could be interesting. But let some of the bears, maybe we'll follow up with a similar poll along that front. Here's an interesting question, Simon. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this because you're out there watching this space day in, day out. Bitcoin Vix asked us, have you guys ever discussed the potential of being in the midst of a gamma squeeze in Bitcoin right now? He says market makers are massively net short out of the money calls, having to keep buying up the spot to hedge off risk. I believe he sent this in a week or so back when we were seeing the massive upside surge out there in Bitcoin. So Simon, this is an interesting prospect. The market makers, you know, I think the public out there and a lot of the funds are probably not selling a lot of Bitcoin calls. They're usually out there buying. So the market makers, as he points out, probably heavily short to the upside. You think this short phenomenon and the fact that maybe we're in a bit of a gamma squeeze, as he puts it, you think that's maybe contributed to the massive upswing and the volatility we've seen of late in Bitcoin, Simon?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert in all of the data. I mean, I think the GVOL guys are probably going to be able to opine on that more than me. But yes, I think it almost has to be. I mean, as you mentioned, this rally was particularly strong. Options are an instrument that are used regularly by Bitcoiners, so crypto people. So I think absolutely you get a situation where essentially you're being sucked up because there's so much negative gamma that people need to cover that's reinforcing itself, and you end up with this sort of negative feedback loop. So yeah, I think absolutely that would have had an implication on the recent rally.
Yeah, I think it's hard to dispute that, given the fact that, you know, I have to imagine, I'm obviously not a market maker out there in Bitcoin options right now, but I have to imagine the flow is, shall we say, predominantly one-sided. I used to experience a lot of this when I switched from the indexes out into the single names like Intel back in the go-go late 90s days, early 2000s, when everyone and their mother only wanted to buy the massive tech names. And so kind of one-dimensional nature to the options flow. I got to imagine something similar out there in Bitcoin right now, where folks, instead of just buying the spot, are just buying the calls and just going to town on that, and makes it challenging for market makers to get their hedges off. And of course, if we keep blowing through strikes like we have, a little bit of that upside squeeze action kicking in. So Bitcoin VIX, I think the answer to that is probably a yes out there. All right. We've got a BTC trader asking, can you really have a one-lot retail explosion in Bitcoin when a one-lot Bitcoin equals nearly 40,000? Yeah. We were joking about this thing on our recent show about how the entire market seems to have been just turned on its head by, call them what you will, the Robinhood traders, the one-lot traders. They're the ones driving up GameStop and things right now. So they are certainly changing the game quite a bit out there, and they still exist. Obviously, you can buy fractional Bitcoin. We're talking about the options, obviously a lot more margin and leverage available out there. But I get your point. It's a different notion of a one-lot trader when Bitcoin itself is about 40,000. So I take your point there. BTC is probably different than the one-lot Robinhood trader out there who's, you know, slinging one lots on, let's say, Ford, $11 stock. A little bit different thing out here. Here's an interesting one, Simon. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this as well. I mentioned earlier in the show, we're getting a lot of people asking about Doge again. Like a couple here. We got Pinnacle Quant. They chimed in saying, we're seeing lots of interest in Doge. Would love to see a Doge futures product at CME. Well, that's interesting. And then we have Freakonaut, I like that handle, chiming in saying, what about DOGECOIN? I know, Simon, this was in your 2014 distribution of your crypto XP fund. Doge was in there, not so much these days. Yeah, have you seen a similar groundswell of interest in Dogecoin of late from people you talk to?
Well, I'm afraid on this question, I really don't have much clue. I mean, other than being a purveyor of these things, I have to look at the various coins, and we use that as constituents. But yeah, I mean, the last one. So we have the 2014 number that you talked about, where the Dogecoin was at number 4 in the rankings. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't really shed much light on that. I haven't seen it as often as the others. I'm just not close enough to these individual coins to comment, unfortunately.
It is a challenging one out there nonetheless, but I anecdotally, from just looking at how many people we've had hitting us up of late about Dogecoin, we might have to start paying more attention to it. It's clearly not in the top 10 of late, but maybe we'll keep an eye on this one. Sounds like CME maybe has been hearing your feedback. Maybe, who knows, maybe we'll see a Doge future. I don't think we got to wait a little bit for that. We still have to wait for ETH to kind of get out of the gate there out there of late. Looks like I'm looking at a little chart here of late. We have seen a nice little move out there in Doge out there, going from all the way, listeners, of a 0.004 back in late December to get this, the lofty, dizzying highs of 0.011427 back there on January 2nd. Then it has since come off quite a bit. It's at about a 0.0087 right now. So I'm sure a lot of that has something to do with the influx of excitement we've been getting of late. We like to keep an eye on all these ancillary altcoin. When they start making it more than a fraction of a cent, it's kind of easier to talk about them from a volume and open interest perspective. Not a lot of options paper going up on a name that itself is effectively an option with this type of pricing. But still, fascinating stuff nonetheless, and certainly a nice move from the 0.0026 it was trading back in October of last year. Unfortunately, listeners, that music means we've come to the end of another epic journey through the world of all things. Oh, I see. It's like Musk shouted out Dogecoin. that accounted for that 20% explosion to the upside. So there you go. All it takes is an Elon Musk shout out on Twitter to see one of these altcoin explode. And that's probably why folks are hitting us up there again. But yeah, like I said, unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end. But before we go, Simon, we touched on the BITVOL. We talked on the BITVOL ETH index. And of course, we talked about leveling up with the crypto XP index. If folks want to learn more, kick the tires, maybe they have questions about them. Where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Yeah, so if anybody wants to look at the indices that we've created, you can find them on www.t3index.com. So you'll find them there. For those who have a Refinitiv terminal, I actually, unfortunately, gave you the wrong ticker before. It's BTC equals T3IN. So that's pretty much 24/7, 365. I think the only time that there's a bit of an outage is consistent with the market, where I think on a Sunday night, 0 UTC, people get to reset their servers and so on. But otherwise, it's a real-time measure for the Bitcoin vol index if you would like to look at it.
There you go. Check it out. T3index.com is the place to go. On behalf of Simon and our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in such great questions about Doge and everything else. Keep them coming. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. This episode is sponsored by Demand Derivatives, a startup futures exchange and clearinghouse trading the world's major assets in a creative new way. You already trade on an exchange. Here is your chance to own one. Before they approach large strategic partners for funding, the pioneering team at Demand Derivatives launched a crowdfunding portal so that regular traders have the chance to buy shares. Learn more and become a part of this revolutionary fintech project now at demandderivatives.com/crowdfunding. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.